Welcome back. You're watching The Globe. Now, Palestinian citizens of Israel and Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip commemorated Land Day on Thursday with marches, protests and speeches. It was the 47th commemoration of Land Day, which marks the Israeli government's expropriation of Arab-owned land in the Galilee on March the 30th, 1976, and the ensuing demonstrations in which 6 Arab Israelis were killed. The day is also seen as significant because it's deemed to mark the first time that Palestinian citizens of Israel organized collectively against Israeli policies. Well, to tell us a little bit more about the day and the situation in her country, we're now joined by Palestine's ambassador to South Africa, Ambassador Hana Jarrar. Thanks so much for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for hosting me.
All right, let's talk about the significance of Land Day and 47 years later, what it's meant to Palestinians over time.
As you mentioned, yesterday all Palestinians around the globe, like every year, we commemorate 47 years of Land Day. On the 30th of March 1976, the Israeli authorities announced the confiscation of thousands of acres of land belonging to Palestinians under the pretext to be used for security reasons or to expand Israeli settlements. Of course, at that time, this caused a widespread protests and general strike in Palestine. And as a result, the Palestinian blood was on the ground. 6 Palestinians were killed and thousands were injured due to this incident. Since then, this day reminds the Palestinians of our resilience in front of the Israeli policies of land confiscation, of settlement expansion, and of mass displacement of Palestinian people. That's why this day is very important. It is a stark reminder for us Palestinians of those who sacrificed their lives to protect our land. And it's also on this day we send a message of salute for millions of Palestinians who still living on Palestine, protecting our land.
All right, so lots been going on in your country as well. I mean, we've seen raids by Israeli forces taking place in places like Jenin, and they say that they've been rooting out militants. What can you tell us about this?
Unfortunately, 2023 has kicked off in a bloody manner for Palestinians. And the Israeli new government, which is an ultra-right wing government, has exerted no effort to put its hostile agenda into the ground. And this can be seen on daily raids against Palestinian cities, Palestinian towns, under different pretexts. Sometimes they say that they want to eliminate freedom fighters. Sometimes they say that they grab land for the sake of expansion of the Israeli settlement. There is always a reason for the Israeli military force to raid Palestinian cities, to kill Palestinian freedom fighters, to kill Palestinian people, to confiscate more land. So we can say that this year is characterized of being an open season on Palestine and Palestinian rights, unfortunately.
So there's a new Israeli government. Some see it as the most right-wing government in Israel's history. How has it been towards Palestine? Because there were fears that with such a hard-line grouping that the Palestinian story would suffer.
If we are going to talk about this particular government, it is characterized only by one word. It's a fascist government, unfortunately, and they do not hide it. If we are going to talk about it, we can talk about, first of all, the program of this government and the figures or the ministers that form this government. If we are going to talk about the program of this government, it's crystal clear. Annexation, confiscation of land, settlement expansion, more structured discriminative procedures against Palestinian citizens inside Israel, large, big-scale campaigns of incitement and call for ethnic cleansing. So, in other words, if we are going to talk about the program, it's a laundry list of war crimes, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid against Palestinians. If we are going to talk about the figures, they are figures like Minister of Finance, who bluntly liked to characterize himself as a fascist, and that was obvious during his latest statements, whether in Huwara village, when he asked the Israeli military to wipe out this village from the map, like in a very blunt call for existential threat against Palestinians. And lately he was talking from a very well-known podium in France, and he was denying the existence of the Palestinian people, stating that there are no such Palestinian people in Palestine. He was standing on a podium with the Israeli flag with a map that shows not only Israel, not only the occupied Palestine, but also parts of Jordan, parts of Syria, and parts of Lebanon, in a very strike reminding the international community that this government is really not only threatening the Palestinian lives and the security and stability in Palestine and Israel, it also constitutes a threat for the regional and international peace, security, and stability.
You mentioned Huwara town, and that's been in the news a lot recently. Hundreds of Israelis, settlers taking action in the town. Tell us about what's going on there.
Unfortunately, this incident reminded the international community of what happened to the Jewish people during the Nazist regime. Unfortunately, at that time, on the 26th of February last month, hundreds of Israeli armed settlers raided into the town of Huwara, daylight, killed one Palestinian, injured hundreds, burned hundreds of Palestinian homes, hundreds of Palestinian cars, and under the supervision and under the protection of the Israeli army. Unfortunately, this was condemned by the international community because it was a stark reminder of the international community of what happened for the Jewish people by the Nazist regime in the 1930s, because it was the first incident that sparked the Holocaust afterwards. Unfortunately, we as Palestinians, civilians, unarmed, we have to witness what happened at that time. And I feel ashamed to talk about this in such times, because it's like inhumane that we need to suffer what themselves had to suffer like 70 years ago.
So what's your thoughts then about approaching the International Court of Justice with some of these issues?
Well, in light of the facts on the ground, in light of the deterioration of the situation on the ground, in lack of the dead end of a political solution, and in light of the unwillingness of the international community to uphold Israel accountable for its systematic violations for international law, for human rights, for the rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination, what can we do as Palestinians? We need to seek the instruments that are provided by the international law to protect our existence, because we have been facing systematically since the occupation of the Israeli forces for Palestine an existential threat. So we need to approach for one of the international multilateral platforms First of all, for our protection, and second, to make use of the instrument of international law. We approached lately the International Court of Justice with the objective of providing us on an advisory opinion on the legal status of the Israeli occupation and the legal consequences of the Israeli systematic violations of Palestinian human rights, Palestinian rights to self-determination. And on the other hand, we need also the international community to protect Palestinians, to support Palestinians in materializing their right in self-determination and establishing their independent state, and also in upholding Israel accountable for the breach of international law.
You mentioned the international community, and perhaps I can ask you, because I think you've partly answered, but what is your call to the international community? What do you want them to do?
The international community are responsible for, first of all, protecting the rights of the people of Palestine, because the plight of the Palestinians is the biggest plight in the modern history. 700 million Palestinians are still scattered in refuge all over the world because of the Israeli occupation, without the right to return back to their homes and towns. The international community, at least in light of the formation of the Israeli government right now, they need to hold Israel accountable for its breaching for human rights and for its breach for international law. The international community should provide protection for the Palestinian people, since we receive threats on daily basis against our very existence and against our people in their homelands, as what happened in Huwara. The international community at least should refrain from receiving figures of this Israeli government because of their violation for international law. The international community is demanded to have one face and not double face when dealing with the same crisis and dealing with figures who constitute a threat to humanity.
Ambassador, are you seeing an escalation? Are things getting worse? I know the politics are always difficult to manage, but generally what Palestinians are facing on a daily basis, year after year, is it getting worse?
Of course. What do you think? It's getting worse, and now with this government, with the Israeli new government, we are threatened on daily basis by our own existence. Smotrich, which is the Minister of Finance in the Israeli new government, he says that it was a fault by Ben-Gurion, the founder of Israel, that he didn't finish the job that he started at Nakba, which means this is an open call to kill all Palestinians. Because what does this mean? This means that when the Israeli occupation come and occupy Palestine, they left Palestinians alive, and this is what the Israelis are suffering from now. So yes, we take these talks seriously, and we take them as a serious threat against the Palestinian people, the Palestinian existence, and we do believe that in light of all the regional and international circumstances and inside Israel and the open calls for ethnic cleansing on daily basis against Palestinians, the situation is going to deteriorate. That's why we approach the International Court of Justice.
You talked about Nakba, 15th of May. Palestinians commemorate Nakba. Can you elaborate on the significance of this?
This year also, the commemoration of Nakba on the 15th of May, 75 years of Israeli occupation of Palestine is taking a special significance, because for the first time, the United Nations General Assembly is adopting the terminology Nakba as is, which means it is an Arabic terminology, which means in English catastrophe. Because as I mentioned, it is the biggest plight in modern history, because when Israel occupied Palestine in 1948, they uprooted 750,000 Palestinian families from their homeland and scattered them in refuge all over the world. Now these 750,000 are turning into 7 million Palestinians still outside their homeland with access denied to their homes because of the Israeli occupation. Yes, every year we commemorate Nakba. This year we commemorate on the 15th of May, 75 years of Israeli occupation. And our president is going to commemorate it from the United Nations General Assembly. Here in South Africa, we are going to commemorate it from Cape Town city. And in this regard, I would love to call Palestinian friends and supporters for the Palestinian right to join us on this day.
All right, Ambassador Hana Jarrar, we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks so much indeed for joining us and sharing the story and the struggle of the Palestinians. And let's hope that it falls on ears and hands that can force change. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you for the South African people, government, political parties, and everyone for their unwavering support for the Palestinian people, as always.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so that was Palestine's ambassador to South Africa, Ambassador Hana Jarrar, speaking to us about Land Day and also the current situation in the country and looking ahead to Nakba on the 15th